Hello there, and welcome to Bo&Joe, the podcast for the free-thinking working men and women. My name is Bo.
I'm Joe.
And as always, our format has us every week. One of us brings a topic to the table to discuss with the other, and the other one has no idea what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
This week, I need y'all to pray for me, because Joe is up at bats. So,
that's funny you should say that.
What, is this about bats?
No. Okay, so I wanted to preface this before I talk about the topic. It's a little controversial in the sense of what we're going to talk. Yes, what we're going to be talking about. A lot of it is based on legends and myths. So again, legends and myths. So what I'm going to be talking about is first King Solomon. So for this episode, we're going to be talking about the legendary King Solomon.
Okay.
But because this is a very complex topic, there's a lot to unravel, not just with King Solomon, but also with Solomon's Temple. So I wanted to dedicate a separate episode to Solomon's Temple, and then a third episode to Solomon's treasure.
So we're going to do like a trifecta.
Right. So first King Solomon. So
I'm curious. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious. What is? You said that this is going to be controversial.
Yes.
So I've never known anything Solomon related to be controversial.
Right. So could you just, for the listeners, what do you know, like the basics of Solomon? Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to think of it, and I was like, my first thought is, isn't that the Midas guy? No, it's not Midas.
Mm-hmm.
Solomon.
So we talked about this a while ago, and when we were talking about it, you told me that the thing that you remember the most was the story of the two women.
The baby, right?
Right. So Solomon, for most people, they know about him from the Bible or from the Talmud or from, like, depending on what religion you're from. He is the legendary king, the son of King David.
Okay.
So he was the builder of Solomon's Temple. He was attributed to be one of the wisest, or the wisest king from the Old Testament, and also the richest king from the Old Testament. He was attributed to be many, many things, but some of the things I want to touch upon is not the things that most people know about, but more in the nature of his Kabbalistic nature. And again, here's where I say, disclaimer, the magician nature of King Solomon.
So he was a wizard, was he?
Okay, so before talking about that, he was also an astrologist. More than anything, he was very, 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 very intelligent in relation and wise in relation to astrology. And this could be attributed to the Jewish tribes and the time they spent in Babylon. So in Babylon, they were indoctrinated to said mysteries of astrology. For example, the prophet Daniel was indoctrinated or initiated in the said mystery schools in Babylon by the Babylonian priests. So a lot of this, when you hear astrology, most of the time you think of astrology in the nature of, what's your sign? Let's talk about what might happen in the coming months or days or blah, blah, blah. But
So I'm not going to lie, like when you said he was a master of astrology, my first thought is, this is going to be one of those things where I don't know. It was not a positive first impression.
Right. And that's another topic that we have to touch on, how the importance of astrology.
I want to be fair to our listeners.
Right.
It's not that I'm going to discount astrology. If you find that it's relevant to you, then by all means, enjoy it. I personally just find them to be overly generalized.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what he has done that would be remarkable.
Well, I wouldn't say remarkable. I would say the things that he did that were legendary, specifically in relation to the creation of the temple and some of the more important aspects of the treasures inside of the said temple. But we're going to get to that in the later episodes. In relation to him as being a Kabbalist, as being a, let's quote unquote, magician or whatever you want to call it, he was also incredibly, incredibly wise in relation to astrology. And the reason why astrology is important, you'll find out a little bit later. But in relation to what we're talking about, I don't mean astrology in just such a thing as a practical astrology is what you and I know of today. It's more of an exoteric type of astrology. It's much more of a deeper or wiser school or discipline. So when I say that, we have to talk about this in a later episode and I definitely want to do this, mystery schools, because it's very important. In order to truly understand this. But in and of itself, if we start talking about that, man, it's going to take up more than just an hour.
Well, just give me a paraphrase. What is a mystery school? I don't think I've ever heard that term.
So the mystery schools, one of the things that you can talk about when you say mystery school is Kabbalah, right? Kabbalah is...
Isn't that a religion?
No. So inside of Judaism, Kabbalah is a way of looking inside not just the Talmud and the Torah, but also understanding some of the mysterious nature and more exoteric information or occult information. So the Kabbalah, when you hear about the tree of life, when you hear about all these different things that are sound quasi-spiritual or exoteric in relation to a study inside of all this, that's mostly what I try to refer to as mystery schools, but it's much deeper than that. So in general, try and think of it as seekers of light, seekers of truth, but not a general truth in the sense of the word, but a much deeper truth. So when I say that, the true wisdom, that which was lost, that's what mystery schools have been trying to do for the past multiple thousands of years.
That's interesting.
So the mystery schools come from a very, 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 very old time. So think pre-Samaria, think pre-Lemuria, think pre all that. This goes from myth and legend, but it is truth in. The mystery schools are not something that I'm making up.
Okay.
So not just the Kabbalah, if you think of, I can't believe I forgot the Emerald Tablets. Again, that's another way of looking at some of the
Emerald Tablets. Are those the ones that are supposedly done by Saul?
Yep. So all of these things correlate to the mystery schools.
Okay.
But I don't want to keep going on the mystery schools. We kind of tapering off the subject. So back to Solomon and him being, a master of astrology. So the reason that I wanted to touch on him in the side of being a magician. So I specifically mean there's a very, very old book that it's technically attributed to him. It's called the Testament of Solomon. It's a very weird work. I think this is the actual word. So could you help me out here? Pseudo-epigraphical. So pseudo-epigraphical.
I have no idea what that word means.
Pseudo-epigraphical. It's a work ascribed to somebody without actually having any true proof that it's from that person. So in other words, it's like if I...
So it's like a memoirs, but
no,
not really.
It's like saying this work was done by me when we really don't know if it was done by me. It's attributed to somebody from myth and legend, but we don't really know whether or not it's true.
Pseudo-epigraphical.
Yes.
That's interesting.
So it was written in the first millennium CE. In the Testament of Solomon gives a completely different view of what we know of King Solomon. In the Testament of Solomon, it's talked that he had the ability to control demons.
Really?
Right. So it's a very peculiar, very strange story. And the story goes from not just him controlling demons, but also summoning them and, in other words, having the ability to do his bidding. So before we go into that, Solomon is something that is found in many different places, right? So you remember we mentioned that we know of him in the Old Testament, the Book of Kings, right?
Right.
We also know that it's a very important person in the Jewish scripts and the Jewish religion.
So that's what I was going to say. When you asked me at the beginning of this, you said, "What do you know of Solomon?" My very first thought was biblical,
right?
And I wanted to say he's a very important figure in Jewish literature.
Yes.
But then I realized that I don't know if that's true or not.
Yes.
Because I know nothing about Jewish anything.
That's a very good point. Okay, so before we get in deeper in this, that's a very good point you brought up. So before in anything, it is a very important character. In I don't want to say anything against that because it is. But as far as archaeology goes, there's very little of what King Solomon and his creation of Solomon's temple. There's very little actual archaeological evidence to this. So a lot of this is based on theological knowledge and legend and myth. Theological knowledge I talk about in relation to what's written in the Old Testament, what's written in the Jewish literature, and also in the Islamic literature. Even in a book like 1001 Nights he's mentioned. So he's written across a variety of different places. But the actual archaeological evidence for King Solomon is very lackluster.
Okay.
So from an archaeological point of view, some of the more scientific relation is either considering him as not to be a king, but more of a chieftain, because of how little actual evidence there is to all of these different attributes that's set for this person or this character in history.
It's a pretty big change.
Right. So as far as that goes, I wanted to make it clear. In relation to science and archaeology, he is considered a legend, I guess you could say. But because of there being so little evidence to it, we can't even hold true for the fact of what it's mentioned in the Bible, for example, of him being this gargantuanly powerful king and wise king and the richest king in the Old Testament. So archaeologists really have not found any actual evidence. So recently they did find in I think it was Jordan, some huge, what they believe was, smelters. Because he was also believed, have you ever seen or remember, there was a couple of movies made in the 50s and 60s called King Solomon's Mines?
No, I never.
Because apart from being very wise, he was extremely rich, and he had the ability...
You had mentioned that he was one of the richest in the Bible.
The richest, yes.
That's interesting.
So they found evidence of actual smelters in the desert, and they're attributing it to the legend of Solomon. I just wanted to touch on that. It's a little bit of information that might lead or give credence to his legend.
So the legend of Solomon is based out of where?
So first and foremost, in the Jewish literature, he is the son of King David. He was the creator of the first temple of Jerusalem, which is the Temple of Solomon,
right?
Which is a cornerstone of a lot of different things,
Absolutely.
not just religion. That's why I wanted to take it into a separate episode. Apart from that, the wiseness of him. So if you look at what's written in the Book of Kings, he was mentioned to be so wise because when he became king at the age of 14, I believe, very young, and what he asked of God was, if you were to be king, right, what would you ask?
If I was to be king?
Yes.
I would want to have the knowledge to take care of the people that I am king over.
Right. So the
most efficiently.
So that's exactly what he asked for. He asked for wisdom.
Then I would ask for a bunch of money.
So he asked for wisdom. It's really funny you should say that, but that's what he asked of God. And God was so grateful that was his ask. That was the one thing he wanted. That not only did he give him the wisdom apparently, as it's said in the book, the most amount of wisdom a person could have, but also, obviously, the experience to understand how to use it. Because wisdom by itself doesn't mean anything. You have to know how to apply it, right?
Okay.
So, again, that's a little poetic license on my part. But back to his more hidden abilities. When I said magician, I was referring to, there's a specific book that we were talking about, right? It's known as the Testament of Solomon. But there's also another book that was written much later called the Lesser Key of Solomon that's attributed to this Testament of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon, also called the Goetia. You know, Goetia, the actual meaning is Greek. It means charm or sorcery.
I thought it was pronounced Goshen.
I
honestly don't know.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I know growing up, I just always called it Goshen. I don't know if that's correct.
So you've heard about it?
But yeah, I've heard of the Goshen. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
When I was going through school, there was one of my favorite subjects was mythology, and Solomon did pop up a few times in that. I'm not saying it, it's not biblical in nature or anything, but there is a substantial amount of mysticism that's attributed to him that your average person doesn't understand, or it's in my case that doesn't even know about.
Yeah.
You and I have talked a little bit about Solomon, not enough to have an educative experience on my part.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what you got.
All right. So I wanted to, before touching on that, this book that was supposedly written by Solomon that contains spells, evocation, exorcism rituals. So I wanted to say one thing that I found particularly interesting. This Lesser Key of Solomon, some excerpt of this are attributed, and again, this is myth and legend, but they're supposedly attributed to some of the actual rituals that are used by exorcists in modern day.
Curious.
Because the book itself, even though, yes, they leverage a supposed ability to conjure spirits, most of it was actually made in order to either exorcise them or remove them or control them. As it's said in the Islamic religion, they didn't mention them as demons; they mentioned them as jinn.
Sure.
And Solomon would use his seal and seal them in these bronze vessels. You remember, as the legend of Aladdin, that you see the genie
no, the genie.
in a lamp.
The lamp.
So the origins of that myth comes from this.
That's interesting.
Right. So
it's a nice little tie-in.
Yeah. So the legend in this book begins with a young man that was favored by King Solomon that was being attacked by a demon, and the demon's name was Ornius. It's important. Ornius. Each of these demons, there's 72 of them written in this book, and each one of them is attributed to a star or a constellation.
A star.
Interesting. And also not just that, but it's also the name is extremely important, and also the angel that they are, how do you say, that they fear. So these are all part of each time that Solomon, I don't want to jump forward. So back to
I'm curious. What's the guy's name? The demon's name?
Ornius.
Ornius.
Yeah. So I think you could see.
All right. So our producer has handed me this here. So Ornius looks. I mean, that's a terrible drawing, but he looks like the quintessential 50s or 60s devil, I guess.
All right.
But there. Oh wait, no. Here we go. Here's some Ornius pictures. So apparently he was a winged devil.
Mm-hmm. So this Ornius character was literally sucking the vitality from this young man's spirit. Every night, this young man would go to sleep, and this Ornius character would literally suck his thumb, and from doing this, he would take the vitality off of the young man's spirit or soul.
Interesting. So when you say young man, how young?
Very, very young. They don't mention specifically the age, but from the ability of the young man's speech, I'm guessing maybe 8 or 12.
Okay.
So Solomon, when he hears of this, he had this young man was in his favor, so he summons the archangel Michael through magical practice that is known again in the lesser key of Solomon as Almadol, and then the Michael entrusts Solomon with a magic ring that contains the Solomon seal, or the seal of Solomon, which we now know that as this star.
Yeah, the Star of David.
Star of David. And we can get into this a little later. With this ring, Solomon gains the ability of summoning demons and controlling them. So that's how it starts. I'm sorry. Solomon then takes control of Ornius, who infiltrated the prince of demons called Beelzebub. Beelzebub. Okay. So when he contacts Beelzebub, he starts asking him again the same questions.
Is it Solomon that's contacting him?
Yeah. So he starts contacting demon after demon. There's 72 of them. I know.
It seems pretty ballsy to me. I mean.
Yeah, but not only that. Here's what the real real ballsy part. When he contacts these demons, not only does he ask them information in order to get more control over them, specifically their name, but he also asks them to do a particular task. And each one of these demons is tasked with a part of constructing his temple. So in the Testament of Solomon, it's said that he could not actually create the Temple of Solomon with iron, because iron was a tool of destruction. So the actual Temple of Solomon had to be created without iron. It had to be created in such a way that either man's hands not supposed to touch it, or iron was not supposed to be used as a tool to create it. So in the legend,
it's a very curious set of parameters.
Right. So the legend says that with this ability that he was granted and this ring, he leveraged it to make these demons create the temple, which to me is just mind-boggling.
Is that to say that there's iron in that temple?
No, there's a lot of things in that temple, but iron is not one of them.
So I'm curious. I mean, I'm just spitballing at this point, but if he needed their help to manipulate the iron, but decided not to use iron.
Not manipulate iron. He needed their help in creating the temple without the use of iron.
But I thought I'm not getting it. So he said, and again, I'm speculating, right? I don't expect you to really have the answer here.
Gotcha.
But it's one of those things where it's like, this seems like cyclical logic to me. I need demons to help me build my temple with iron.
Without the use.
No, he can use iron as long as he doesn't touch it.
No. Nothing in the temple could have been shaped or created with iron, because iron is a tool that is used. So
I misunderstood what you were saying. Okay. I thought you said that man could not use their own hands.
I'm sorry.
I got you. No, I'm with you now. Okay.
So
thanks for clearing that up.
No problem. So according to the Lesser Key of Solomon, there were these 72 demons that he leveraged to make this temple. And you know what's interesting? These 72 demons are also mentioned in the Book of Enoch. And you remember in the Book of Enoch when they talk about the angels who rebelled against God because of their desires for the daughters of man? Same 72 demons.
That's curious.
Yeah. So the legend follows with Solomon's control of these 72 demons, as I said, to control the temple. And then he meets Asmodeus, or is also known as Ashmedai, the king of the demons.
Asmodeus.
Yes. He tricks Solomon to surrender the ring, and casts Solomon over 400 miles into Jerusalem, where for a very long period of, I think it's 4 years, Solomon wanders because Asmodeus basically takes the shape of King Solomon. And when this is happening, he takes his ring, throws it, and supposedly a fish eats the ring. And later, much later in the story, after his 4 years of basically being a beggar amongst the people, claiming to be the king, King Solomon himself, and everybody not believing, which was so sometimes later attributed to why he was so wise, because of these 4 years that he had to spend as a beggar.
I understand.
And later, when he actually finds the same fish, and he was eating this said fish, and he finds the ring again. And when he finds this ring, he goes and challenges Asmodeus and takes reign again of the kingdom of Jerusalem. So it sounds almost like the plot of a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure there is a Solomon movie somewhere.
There's a couple of them.
Man, I am interested now.
But there's more than just that. There's also some other things that are attributed to him, like the alchemy of plants. So there's another book that was supposedly written by him that was later entrusted into his son. And there's just so many things about King Solomon that are very interesting. But what was really peculiar to me is all of this information, and I studied went to a Catholic school, and I only knew Solomon as again, like as you said, that person who was very wise, and his wisdom was the one who attributed the idea of having these two ladies claiming to have one son, and because of them saying, "Oh no, that's my son," that same story, that allegorical story. So that's what I knew of him. But when I started reading in deeper, and actually what's written in this book's not only about that, man. It tells you how to create amulets, how to attribute these amulets to specific dates of the year, how to empower or control them with or charge them. It's so peculiar, man. Like there's so much information contained in this book which literally talks about magic, and to me it's borderline crazy. You know,
which book are we talking
about? The Testament of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon specifically.
Okay.
There's also Ashmedai, King of Demons, which is another book that talks about a lot of this.
You said Ashmedai?
Ashmedai, yeah. Ashmedai is the other name for Asmodeus.
Oh, you did say that.
Yep. Okay. And there's also a lot of very interesting books from Jewish Mish called the Midrash that talks about the same thing. And it's extremely peculiar, man, because if we keep going on this, it borders on the edges of madness in my mind. Because really, I mean, if you talk about talismans, if you talk about tying things to different astrological signs, knowing demons' names and knowing which angel torments them, that's what's written in this book. And then if you start going into, hey, Maria, could you, the producer, can you pass me a pen? I need to draw something real quick. So this is the original sign of Jupiter. So the sign of Jupiter is like this.
When you say Jupiter, you're talking about the Roman god.
So it's a symbol. It's a very ancient symbol.
Well, it looks like something from the Blair Witch.
So the ancient symbol of the sign of Jupiter is the seal of Jupiter. This is the seal of Jupiter.
Okay.
The seal of Jupiter is attributed to being something satanic, something that is used to conjure up demons. Then you look at the Star of David.
I'm glad you're drawing this in your book.
Yeah. So the interesting aspect of this seal of the Star of David is if you look at the actual geometry of it and what it actually means, it contains the same symbol, but that not only contains it, it encapsulates it or traps it. So in the symbol itself, you could see how this, which is attributed to be, I guess, quote unquote, the bad sign, the one that's used to summon or conjure, and this was the one that meant protection or entrap. And this is the one that's attributed to him having in the ring, apart from the true name of God. So the ring was twofold. It was this sign, which is later becomes the Star of David, but previously it's a much older sign, much older symbol. It also contained the true name of God, which is important to note because we're going to talk about this in a later episode when we get into the treasure of Solomon, which also involves the ring and much other things that are much more curious than what we're talking about right now. Because to me, the real reason I wanted to talk about Solomon, I wanted to do a preface before getting into the more mysterious nature or the more interesting aspects of specifically the temple, the intentions behind the temple, and then the treasure and what the treasure means. Because out of everything, the intention behind all of this is what truly matters in relation to the mystery schools and the true knowledge. And when I say that, I know it sounds weird, but we will be able to tie all this information to modern Freemasonry, to the Knights Templar. I mean, it goes far and above what I can mention in 1 hour. But it's something that was looked upon by the Ananurba, so that ancient, that old story about that group of Nazis that were trying to find. So this is something that was looked upon for many, many eons in history. And the reason I wanted to talk about Solomon was because I first wanted to give a not a preface, but more of a foundation. So out of all of this, what is, from your perspective, crazier? The fact that he was a magician? The fact that he was an astrologist? I mean, what have you found out of all this information that I just want to hear your thoughts on it, really.
Well, I have learned a lot from everything you've just said. As I think back on some of the details, I don't really know where to start. I'm not really surprised to hear somebody from the Bible be labeled a wizard. So I think for me, the most interesting aspect is when we start talking about the 72 demons, and then you've had the Book of Enoch mention the same 72, and then other historical...
Yeah, Talmud.
Right. When they start referencing the same 72 demons, my first thought, I'm not going to lie, when you said it, I was picturing like 72 guys just who are really bad dudes. Just dirty deeds done dirt cheap kind of deal. That clearly is not the case, but for some reason it helped me visualize what Solomon was doing. And I find it interesting you said, one of the last things you said is that the ring, that's paired up with the true name of God.
Yeah.
Now, we've had discussions just kind of touching various religious aspects of our own beliefs. And while I'm not necessarily part of the Judeo-Christian theorem, I find it interesting that if a God does exist, having that being's name, I find that to be an interesting conversation piece to begin with.
Right, and if you correlate that with the fact that the first thing that he asked of each demon was its name.
No, it's because he gave him power over it.
Right.
Right.
So you get with the correlation. The ring contained the true or hidden name of God, not Yahweh or not. So the hidden name of God, it's important because this is also something that's going to be found in some of the King Solomon's treasures. And the importance of it is in the amount of power that name wields. And it's extremely important in relation to the mystery schools and what actually the mystery schools or the pearl of knowledge hidden within the mystery schools. A lot of it boils down to that same thing, one thing, which is the true name, which is a very peculiar thing.
So, in your research, did you find out the true name?
Well,
I had to ask.
No. Long story short, no.
Does that mean you actually did look?
Yeah, man.
For the true name of God.
Well, it's a funny thing to say that I looked for it because, man, this is something that has been looked upon for eons. Thousands of years. And
you thought you'd find it on the internet?
Even Percival looked for it. So,
is that what he's referring to, the Grail?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, it's a very strange legend. Let's call it that. But I wanted to get into that in the later series when we talk about the treasure, because the treasure is going to contain not only about the information contained within the true name of God, but around the artifacts that are used and the meaning behind them. But back to him, other than the names and other than the fact that he can control these demons, to me, first and foremost, this person was ordained, right, by God. Think about it, right? And again, putting everything aside, just think of the story in and of itself. Why would a person ordained by him do this thing? Order these demons to create this temple? That to me was the bigger mystery. What the hell point behind this whole ordeal is? This story about this grandiose man or legend having all these different beings wield their own powers to try and granted, some of these, the 72 demons, some of them actually had legions beneath them. So we're talking about, the bigger players of the underground game, if you want to call them. So he was leveraging these creatures to do something as mundane as crafting the hemp ropes inside of the temple to carving the marble. and slapping the stones and molding the bronze. I mean, it's insane.
It just seems like a really bad idea to me. I mean, I'm obviously not Solomon. I don't have the wisdom of Solomon. I don't know the name of God, but
right.
When I think about, I'm trying to think of a politically correct way to say what I'm thinking, and I can't come up with one. So I apologize to our audience ahead of time for what I'm about to say. But that seems akin in my mind of like Hitler taking his Jewish prisoners and making them build the death camp, and then I don't know. It's
peculiar.
Why would you want a place like made after people you despise? Or
wait, so it's important to note the temple's purpose originally was to host the tabernacle and to host specifically the Ark of the Covenant. So for many years, while they were roaming the desert, the Ark of the Covenant was holded in a specific place with a purpose and an intent. And they were trying to create a home for the Ark of the Covenant. And this home had to abide by specific rules. And when I say rules, I mean, we talked about this, yes, right. So we talked about this before. In the realm of Freemasonry, you will learn that there is intent behind each angle or construction. And when I say that, I mean each angle and each measurement has a purpose and an intent. And you can translate that into something that has more deeper meaning, or as a symbol, as you could say. So once we get into the temple, you'll find out more about what I mean. Okay. But it's much more interesting than what meets the eye. It's not just a building. There's a lot to this place. And I wanted to separate them out because truly, the amount of information in the temple and the legend of the temple is so vast that I don't think we're going to have enough time in 1 hour to cover it.
No, I imagine not.
Solomon himself, realistically, there's not that much that's mysterious about him, apart from what we're talking about. Everything else, like for example, his relation to the Queen of Sheba, which ties him into Egypt.
Now, doesn't he have some sort of relation with Hiram?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But that's going to tie in back into the building of the Solomon's Temple.
Well, why don't you just, touch a little bit on it?
Sure, okay.
I want our users to know when we finally do get into the second part of this, I want them to already have a working knowledge of both Solomon, his thought process, and the people he worked with and what their goal was.
So there's two Hirams in the story. There's Hiram, the king of Tyre, and then there's Hiram Abiff.
What was the first one?
Hiram, king of Tyre.
King of Tyre?
Yes. So Tyre was the land that was more towards the area of the, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot the name of this ocean, but the Phoenician king, basically.
Okay.
So this Phoenician king granted him the actual raw materials that he would need to create the temple. The
temple itself.
Mm-hmm. And Hiram Abiff was the architect. He was the engineer behind the idea or the layout of the king of Solomon.
So Tyre Hiram gave the materials to Solomon. Mm-hmm. Solomon then used the knowledge of Hiram Abiff, who designed it, to put it together using demons and the name of God.
So that's where legend and myth kind of intertwine. Okay. So the legend says that it was not built by man's hands.
Well, that kind of follows with the myth, right?
Right. But the myth is, again, these demons building it. But the actuality of what we know of is a lot of it's based on books, Masonic books that talk about Hiram Abiff and the legend of Hiram Abiff and what he actually created, and that pearl of knowledge that was hidden in history from Hiram Abiff in relation to the ritual nature that is supposed to be performed. So there's also something that we have to do. There's a correlation between Hiram Abiff and King of Tyre Hiram. There's some legends that talk about them being the same person. So the King of Tyre and Hiram Abiff being the same person. That's a much deeper rabbit hole that I don't want to get into because honestly, that's borders on insanity. Really, I don't think it's true. Yes, because it goes down a very weird path.
And I just asked myself, how common was the name Hiram back then?
Well,
not that I'll know. Ever know.
I don't know how common it was, but the aspect of how important that character is, he's very important. And again, back to the mystery schools, he's very important inside of the mystery schools. He's very important inside of Freemasonry. He's a cornerstone of the York Rite of Freemasonry. So the third degree, talks about a dramatization of Hiram Abiff's story. So Hiram Abiff, he had the understanding of the intent and architecture that was to be in place in the temples, in the temple that he was building. So because of having this understanding, he, at that time, that would not only grant you, obviously, more wealth, but it would grant you more wisdom. And the lesser or the initiated Masons at that time, and again, this is all part of the legend of Freemasonry, wanted to take that wisdom from Hiram without going through the paces or going through the steps. So there were three of them, and all three of them asked them, tell us the secrets to the intent, and tell us this true nature that you know of. And each time he said no, and he died. They killed him. The legend on goes forth on him not only dying, but then when they lay his body on the ground, 3 days later, they look at this grave and it was empty. So again, there's a lot to unravel there, but long story short, Hiram King of Tyre helped on the creation of Solomon's temple. These demons and all this legend, what really to me boils down to some of the more weird aspects of religion in relation to all of these different stories are correlated amongst all the major religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
Right.
But the weird aspect of it is it borders on heresy. I mean, think about it. If we were to be talking about this 300-400 years ago, we would have been burned at the stake.
Only because we're talking about manipulation of demons.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. To one's will. And the other side of this is some of the other things that I found during researching is that, yes, some of this actually is supposedly used by exorcists.
I mean, to be fair, if I'm going to be an exorcist and I know that a guy, historically speaking, who has the control over demons, then yeah, I might invoke him.
Right.
You know, and that seems to be a no-brainer.
Because the book, if you actually read each one of the lines of the Testament of Solomon, when he's actually conjuring these spirits, one by one, he asks them, what angel torments you? What is your name? First thing is, what is your name? What angel torments you? What do you do? Like, these are the lines of questions that he asks them. And each one of the answers gives him more power over said demon, to the point that he bends over and touches each demon with his seal and obliges that demon to do his bidding, which again is a subset of a construction of a part or something inside of the temple. It's a very peculiar read. And for me, the fact that it was written supposedly about 900 years after the death of King Solomon, that's even more peculiar.
I don't know. In my mind, that kind of gives it the what do you call it? A
pseudo-epigraphical. Yeah, pseudo-epigraphical. So it's not really, again, it's ascribed to King Solomon.
So the definition of pseudo-epigraphical, by the way, I don't know if we're saying it right, but I looked it up while we were talking, and it means the fictional works.
Right, right, because it's attributed, so you can read deeper into that, into the meaning of it, but realistically, it's not that it's just fictional, it's attributed to something wrongfully. So it's like me saying that you wrote the Bible. You know, you didn't write the Bible. Who
How do you know?
I mean, good point, but you get what I mean. It's attributing a work of fiction or non-fiction or whatever to somebody that there's no real basis for.
Gotcha.
But the other part of this, which is the Lesser Key of Solomon, that's more mysterious. So the Lesser Key of Solomon is, again, attributed to being written by King Solomon. So that one I cannot disprove or discount. Because we know that the Testament of Solomon is, like, as you said, fictionally attributed to him.
Sure.
But the Lesser Key, I don't know. And you know what's more interesting about the Lesser Key of Solomon? You ever heard of a person called Aleister Crowley?
Sure.
So guess who rewrote the Lesser Key of Solomon?
Yeah.
So Aleister Crowley, for our viewers, or our listeners, he was a very peculiar man. He was a Freemason. He was the creator of a completely different secret society called the Golden Dawn. He's a very important character inside of Freemasonry because of what he wrote and what he basically revitalized, I guess you could say, some of the attributes of the mystery schools, but kind of turned them on their head. So a lot of people consider him to be a Satanist.
Yep. There's a Ozzy Osbourne song where he mentions that Mr. Crowley.
So not just, I mean, it was popularized. So Aleister Crowley was very much popularized. But if you go, for example, to Manly P. Hall's library in Los Angeles, the Library of Philosophical Research, now the University of Philosophical Research, you'll see a bust of him. He's a very important man regarded inside of the mystery schools because of his research and because of his not attributes, it's not the right word, because of his works that he created.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, contributions. So he took a look at the Lesser Key of Solomon, rewrote it, and the last known, edition of this book is written by him. Inside, he denotes a peculiar way of leveraging some of these evocations, and he also talks about sexual magic. It's a very peculiar book, but it also, you can tie it into much more mysterious things, and again, back to the mystery schools. I think most of this, the reason I want to talk about, apart from the later talking of Solomon's temples and later talking about the Solomon's treasure, is the importance that we will see of this story inside of the mystery schools. And the reason I say that is because a lot of this sounds, fictional.
I mean, it sounds fantastic.
Fantastic, absolutely.
That's the word.
And I agree wholeheartedly. For me to take this into not even conjecture. I don't even know what the word for it is, because from the most part of it, it just sounds like crazy talk. I mean, really. I mean, it doesn't matter what you believe in. Even if you're a wholehearted theological believer in whatever of these religions is, it's a very difficult thing to take in.
Sure.
But then when you start reading about the mystery schools, you start seeing the correlations, or as you say, the synchronicity of it, it's so peculiar. Things start getting entwined, and then things start unraveling on you, and you start seeing more of a common narrative that actually makes more sense when you understand what this all means.
So let's pause it there for a moment. Let's find out what your interpretation of all this is.
For me, a lot of this stems from the greater pearl of truth or light. So when I say that, I'm going to get a lot of flack because a lot of the people
do say it.
Oh shit.
We seem to take turns mixing those up. Go ahead.
We do. So when I say pearl of light, so when you think in history of the people who were looking for illumination, you obviously are going to think of one thing. And if it's not one thing, it's the other, and both are bad things.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So the illumination, or the illuminated one, in Catholicism, is Lucifer.
I've never heard that attributed to him, actually.
He's the bringer of light. And also, if you think of the other illuminated ones, you'll think of the Illuminati. So in both connotations, it's a very negative, or at least from what we know, is a very negative thing, or a very negative connotation. But realistically, what I take of it is a foundation that's based in a story or a narrative that gets you some understanding of the meaning of what you're going to learn later, or the intention behind it. So even if all of this is fake, and even if all of this is a grand analogy of some sort to try to explain something that's extremely just difficult, in the end it all boils down in my mind to that thing that you told me a long time ago. And whenever you don't understand something that is scientific, right, you attribute magic to it. Right. So I think in the end, for me, if I can base anything that's more of a true nature than anything else, it's probably going to be...
So our producer just handed me this. The Hebrew word translated as, I'm going to butcher the shit out of this, Haleo, pronounced as Haleo. Okay, I didn't do too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Occurs once in the Hebrew Bible, and according to the KJV-based Strong's Concordance, means shining one or light bearer.
Mm-hmm.
Literally means
the illuminated one,
bringer of dawn, for the morning star. And I know I have heard Lucifer called
the morning star.
The morning star, yeah.
So that ties into something that, again, that a lot of people that are educated in Catholic or Christian theology, the Gnostics. So if you ever heard of the Gnostics kind of took what we know of as Catholicism on its head. So long and short, they believed that a lot of what we were told was good was bad, and a lot of what we were told was bad was good. So if we can understand what that means, it's a very scary thought.
Well, I know that there's a fellow who created, and I hope I have this information correct, Anton LaVey, who created the the first Church of Satan, I believe is what it was called. When people asked him, why are you an open Satanist and things like this, what he told people really surprised them, because he didn't come out and admit to being a devil worshiper or, blood sacrifice or whatever, but he said something to the same what you just indicated, is that the Church of Satan, instead of following, and I'm by no means, I just want to make sure you understand and our listeners understand. I'm not saying that I subscribe to any of these thoughts, but
and neither do I. This is just.
I just want to make sure this is just conversation.
Yes.
But apparently, he said that it is more about the Church of Satan was more about having pride in yourself and loving yourself and things like it was all the things that we're told are bad in like Catholicism, like pride and vanity, and well, not vanity, but things like the seven sins.
Right.
Some of those aren't so terrible, and some of the things that you were biblically forbid to do, you can do as Church of Satan, and that just sounds a lot like what you just said.
Right.
The turning things that Christianity says you shouldn't do and saying, yeah, you should do it.
I mean, think about the oldest story in the Genesis.
The oldest story.
Yeah, Adam and Eve.
Okay.
You remember what Adam and Eve did?
Well, I wasn't there to see it.
I just mean the story, right? The story goes that everything on the paradise was, granted to them, except for one thing. And what was that one thing? The forbidden fruit. Where did the forbidden fruit come from?
A tree.
The tree of knowledge.
And they
see what I mean? Yes. The tree of knowledge. Get the correlation.
So there's actually I'll save that for another podcast, but I think that they might have found it here on Earth where the Garden of Eden actually was.
Yeah, there's some very interesting research on that.
Yeah, I was really, really impressed at just how thought-provoking that discovery was.
Yeah, I mean and I want to jump on the subject you said, and by no means what we're talking about, either of us believe this to be true. We're not Satanists, we're not devil worshippers or anything like that. I am very interested in this because for a very long time I've been enamored with these ancient or hidden truths in history.
Oh, I understand.
And upon all the time that I spent reading, when I stumbled upon this particular character, it just blew me away.
When you say this character, you mean Solomon?
Solomon.
Okay.
His importance is not something that's going to be laid out in just what we talked about. What we laid out is something very simple. It's a stringy foundation that talks about magical things or evocations and demons and all this stuff. But really, the reason that it's important to talk about this first is for what we're going to talk about later.
No, I understand. That makes total sense.
This is not the interesting part. I know that sounds crazy.
That's like the opposite of every time he's... Well, this is the interest. Now we're doing the interesting part.
No, this is not. Yes, no, this is not where it gets interesting. This is. Imagine how interesting the other stuff's going to be, man. Because this is just a simple foundation to what really, truly, just completely evoked my mind.
Well, I think we're going to have probably a lot of discoveries, a lot of things that people don't know about Solomon. I've learned a few things myself. Growing up, I was very much into. I guess you would say Enochian. Yeah. I was very interested in things that were anything Enochian. I was very interested in
angelic language.
Yeah, and I was interested in demonology, but not for the sake of worshiping them, but because I found the subject like the fact that there are so many. We'll use the word documented, but obviously it's not.
Yeah.
That there's so many documented angels and so many documented demons, and to see how what's the word? What would be a good word? They intermix a lot.
Yeah.
Like there's a yin and there's a yang for everyone. There's an angel that is better than a particular demon, but there's a demon who is a weakness to a particular angel. Right.
There's a hierarchy in the book of in this Testament of Solomon as well. To your point, like the Megatron and all Megatron. Oh my God, I forgot the name of it, but
is it Metatron?
Metatron, thank you. Okay. So Metatron and all the hierarchy of angels.
Although I do like Megatron.
Right? Yes. So you know what I mean? The choir of angels, right? So you can see the hierarchy going down, but you see the same thing in this Testament of Solomon, and also you see it in the book of Goetia or the lesser key of Solomon. So to your point, there is a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Even amongst them, some of them are princesses and knights and again, princes and kings. So there is a hierarchy among them, but also the knowledge that each one of them controls and the corruption that they inlay in men. So each one of these demons has a specific corruption that they inlay in men. Some of them was on the wives. Some of them was on the actual like physical nature of man. It's extremely detailed.
Yeah, for the folks at home, just know that there is a crowned prince for just about every malady. So there's a demon who is for essentially disease, and there's a demon for famine. There's a demon for nightmares. There's a demon for physical disability.
Right.
There's all kinds of. It never stops.
Yeah.
And growing up, I always just thought it was just an uneducated mind's way of dealing with things they didn't understand. Hence the magic part.
Right.
But I'm curious, as we get close to the end of the hour, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the 72 demons? Like, do you think they were born of a cosmic hellfire? Do you think they were people who were just really bad and were being called demons? I mean, what do you think the demons were?
So, psychologically, oh man, that's a very difficult question.
It's all opinion. Right?
It's opinion based, but if I try to unravel that the best way I can, each one of them correlates to either a weakness of man, and when I say man, I mean humanity in general, or a better way of attributing corruption through a fallacy of man. So it's a very difficult thing. It reminds me a lot of Joseph Campbell and The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So when you see that, you hear of the hero's journey, as it were. I believe that this is a sort of the opposite or the antithesis of something like that. So if you would say, instead of a hero, how to create a villain, this would be the corruption that inlays the perfect villain. But that's one way of looking at the coin. My true meaning behind all this is a foundation or the foundation stone of what lies beneath each one of these malicious beings. And when I say that, I don't mean in the actual nature of who they are, but what they mean. So, long and short of it, I believe they're symbols. So I believe what's important behind all of this is not what we're told. I believe we have to read between the lines, which is something it's a very common theme within the mystery schools. It's not what you're told.
So when you think of the scenario where Solomon used the 72 demons to build the temple, how do you envision it from a physical perspective? Let's say you're standing there watching this happen.
I don't think it was demons. I don't think.
So what do you think it was? That's my question.
I think that what we're seeing is a symbological representation in a narrative which hides the true nature. And when I say that, I mean, if you think of symbols, they're always going to have a variety of meanings.
Sure.
If you think of mystery schools or secret societies, you're told the truth is this, and you're taught by a mentor for many, many years that this is the truth, until later you find out that you have to forget everything because everything was wrong. And then you start understanding what real truth is. I think this is what that is. This is a foundation based on a fallacy constructed in a narrative of symbols. And I know this sounds extremely...
No, that's the second time you've said that. I'm trying to figure out from the... I agree with everything you said, but I'm trying to figure out how your answer correlates to me. So what I mean is, like I said, you're standing in front of the temple, you're watching it being built. What is building it? You said that it's the 72 demons correlates to some ideas, essentially. I'm paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you watching? So
What am I watching?
Are you watching humans still build it?
I believe it was humans, absolutely.
Okay.
So I don't think that this is something built by a bunch of demons or mythical creatures, nothing like that. I believe that what we're told is something that cannot be explained in such a profane manner as, I would say, a book or a narrative that clearly states what you need. So like, as it were, instructions, right? This is such an important bit of information that it cannot be related across the eons of history in such a way that anybody could understand it. So it has to be coded. So what we're looking at in its basic form is a codex. So as you could see, that ties into everything we've talked about before in relation to the mysteries of the Society of the Mist and all these different secret societies that are looking into all these codex books or mysterious books, which we should definitely touch on. And in relation to your question, that's, I think, the actual true nature of this Lesser Key of Solomon. It's a codex. It's not what it means. It's not what it seems.
I see. Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I've often tried to kind of, in a similar way that you just described, I've tried to envision it's difficult to put it to phrase it in a way that gets the point across, but in the Bible, and unfortunately I've spent a lot of time in my youth being what you would call a Bible scholar, because it was where I grew up in a certain part of the country. There was a heavy focus on religion, specifically at the Bible. And we spent a lot of time with our noses in each of the pages. And I remember even as a child sometimes trying to envision what I was being told. And when I hear stories like such powerful, religiously based rhetoric like this, then my mind immediately goes back to that, where I'm trying to envision what the author was trying to communicate.
Right.
And I constantly have to remind myself what their version of devil or what their version of demon or angel is. I would say almost 100% is not going to be something I can correlate using their words.
Right.
So I was just curious as to your thought process. I'm glad you shared that with us.
Yeah. I know we're coming up to the end, but the last thing I wanted to say is, again, from the next couple of episodes, when we talk more about this, you'll understand why I mean this is a codex. Because I do not believe this is a specific, just, blah, this is what I'm trying to tell you. This is the instructions to how to summon demons. I don't believe that's what this is.
Do you have those instructions? Is that a PDF?
You can download the book, yeah. You can buy it. You can buy it if you want.
I'm already married. And she's going to kill me. All right.
Oh, wow.
Well, we have come to the end of our hour.
Well, call about summoning demons, man. Oh, man.
Yep. Probably won't be here next episode, guys. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Joe, I appreciate you bringing in a good conversation, something we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is going to be a couple of episodes, so hopefully our folks are interested in finding out how deep the rabbit hole goes.
All right. Yeah.
As always, thanks for joining us here. I am Bo.
I'm Joe.
And we'll talk to you next time.